Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Richa Chaudhary, Associate Consultant Obs and Gynae at Akash Healthcare. And I welcome you all to the webinar on the topic hormonal changes in pregnancy under the ages of NMI. And without taking much time, let me introduce you to today's speaker, Dr. Vinita Gupta. She is an eminent gynecologist. She's an alumni of Lady Hardinge Medical College and Kasturba Hospital. She is presently Associate Professor and Senior Specialist at Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar Medical College and Hospital. She is an eloquent speaker, panelist at AOGD, NARCHI, and chairperson of PCPNDT Northwest. She has been awarded CM Award for Work Excellence in Cover Care, also WHO Fellowship for Health Management in Galileo Institute of Israel. We welcome you, ma'am, and request you to proceed with the presentation. And any queries will be entertained at the end of the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Richa, for such a beautiful and elaborate introduction. Now, without wasting any more time and with the anticipation that many more will join, let's start the presentation. Okay. So, once again, I would like to know whether the PPT is visible. Is it visible?
No, ma'am. I request you to kindly share it, ma'am.
I'll just do it again, sir. No issue. So, I think it is visible now.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible. Dr. Chaudhary, you're muted if you want to say something.
No, I was just saying it's visible. Sorry.
Thank you, thank you. So, as I said that we are in our this a series of basics about the obstetrics and gynecology. This is the fourth lecture in continuation. In my first presentation, I had discussed about the physiological changes of pregnancy, and today I am going to discuss about the hormonal changes in pregnancy and a little bit about the metabolic changes too, because a part of metabolic changes was already discussed in my previous slide also. So, see, the endocrinology of a human pregnancy involves endocrine and a series of metabolic changes that result from the physiological alterations that occur at the boundary between mother and the fetus. That means there is a close, compact feto-maternal and placental unit. All of these three units, they act together to bring about the various endocrinological and other physiological changes of pregnancy. Now, the chief hormones which are involved in the pregnancy or associated with pregnancy are estrogen, progesterone, human chorionic gonadotropin, and human somatomamotropin, that is the growth hormone. Other hormones of some less significance are like relaxin, not less significance, but you can say like the other hormones are relaxin, prolactin, inhibin A, human placental lactogen, and cortisol, and they may be a few more others also, which may not be directly related to or linked to the pregnancy, but yes, their levels are altered. Now let us discuss about each hormones one by one. So first I am going to talk about the human chorionic gonadotropin, also known as HCG. It is basically secreted by the syncytiotropoblast, that is a part of the placenta. See, when the fertilization occurs and the blastocyst is formed, it gets implanted into the decidua or the endometrium. So when this implantation occurs, then a layer of syncytiotropoblast is formed, which is the primary secretor of HCG. HCG can be detected in maternal blood 6 to 9 days after the conception and may be detectable in the urine 1 to 2 days later, that is by 7th to 10th day. So whenever a person does a pregnancy test, see, the conception is actually, fertilization is occurring 14 days prior to the missed period, because the ovulation is occurring 14 days prior to the missed period. So the fertilization is also occurring at that time. So very often, as you can see, that the UPT is positive even before the patient actually misses the period. That is, the whole basic about how come the UPT becomes positive so early, because beta HCG can be present in the urine 1 to 2 days, that is 7 to 10 days post fertilization. Now the doubling time for this beta HCG is 1.4 to 2 days. What is the significance of doubling time? Basically, this doubling time is used to diagnose a successful or a viable conceptus. That is to differentiate between a missed or a blighted ovum or a ectopic pregnancy or a viable fetus. Right. Now, this mainly the main function of this HCG is basically it prevents the regression of corpus luteum, and which in turn maintains the pregnancy. I'll be elaborating on this part in my subsequent slide. Its detection in the urine provides a highly sensitive and a specific test for the diagnosis of pregnancy. The secretion of this beta HCG begins to fall by 10 to 12 weeks, although it remains detectable in the urine throughout the pregnancy. And there is a peak at 32 weeks also. That means in the first trimester, the beta HCG levels are high, then they become plateau, and then there's a subsequent rise at almost 32 weeks, and then they again start falling. And the levels of beta HCG almost disappear from circulation 2 weeks post-delivery. Now, what is the structure of beta HCG, of this HCG? So it is basically a glycoprotein. It consists of hormone non-specific alpha subunit and the specific beta subunits. So as you can see that the beta subunit is specific for the HCG of pregnancy. So it is basically the beta subunit which is assessed biochemically whenever we are trying to diagnose pregnancy by radioimmunoassays. So alpha subunit is biochemically similar to LH, FSH, and TSH. That is why this alpha subunit is not used for diagnosis, because there will be a lot of cross reactions, whereas the beta subunit is measured in all of the assays. The plasma half-life of this HCG is 36 hours and doubling time is 1.4 to 2 days. The maximum levels of this beta HCG reach by 60th to 70th day of pregnancy. And the levels may be as high as 100 to 200 international units per ml. The levels of beta HCG disappear from circulation post-delivery, which I have already discussed. Now, what are the main functions of this HCG? So the chief function of HCG is the production of progesterone by corpus luteum. Now, what is corpus luteum? I think you already know, or maybe I can just give a little revision that whenever the ovulation occurs in the mid-cycle, the egg which is released, if by chance the pregnancy has to occur, that is the sperms are present and the fertilization occur, then this ruptured dominant follicle persists and grows to form corpus luteum. This corpus luteum is the very important structure as far as the maintenance of pregnancy is concerned, because this is the chief producer of progesterone in early weeks of pregnancy. The HCG also stimulates male external genitalia development in the male fetus. That is, whenever the conceptus in utero is male, then the development of external genitalia is dependent upon the HCG. The HCG also has immunosuppressive activity. It stimulates both adrenal and placental steroidogenesis. It also stimulates maternal thyroid production and also is responsible for the release of relaxin from corpus luteum. Now, HCG is considered to play a very important role in the early pregnancy discomforts like morning sickness and fatigue. So HCG in the early days of pregnancy helps to support the pregnancy by stimulating the ovaries to produce progesterone, resulting in the cessation of the menstrual cycles during the pregnancy. So high levels of HCG can be detected in certain conditions like hydatidiform mole or choriocarcinoma, or Down syndrome, that is the trisomies, whereas the low levels of HCG can be seen in ectopic pregnancy and spontaneous abortion. So here is the role of knowing the levels of HCG at particular period of gestation and the importance of knowing the doubling time, right? Then, as I said, that under the effect of this HCG, corpus luteum is formed. So what are the functions of corpus luteum? So the main hormones which are secreted by corpus luteum are progesterone, estradiol, that is estrogen, relaxin, and inhibin A. Now, progesterone. See, progesterone is again the chief hormone which is responsible for maintenance and continuation of pregnancy. And if there is deficiency of progesterone at any stage of the pregnancy, then it may result into abortion or maybe loss of pregnancy. So corpus luteum produces the progesterone exclusively till 7 weeks. Then the placenta takes over the progesterone production at 10 weeks completely. That is the complete takeover of the progesterone production by placenta. at 10 weeks. So what is in between 7 to 10 weeks? So 7 to 10 weeks is the luteal placental shift phase. That is, the production is shifting from corpus luteum to placenta. So in between this time, the whatever progesterone levels are there in the circulation are basically from both the sources, that is the corpus luteum as well as the placenta. Now the placenta may take over the function of complete progesterone production as early as 8 weeks. And the maximum progesterone levels are seen at term, which can be as high as to 2 to 50 milligrams per day. Now, how is this progesterone synthesized? See, the corpus luteum basically secretes 17 hydroxyprogesterone before 7 weeks of POG, whereas the placenta utilizes mainly the maternal cholesterol to form the pregnenolone, which is the precursor of mature progesterone. The 3-beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase, which is present in the maternal circulation, converts this pregnenolone to progesterone. Now, the slow progesterone levels can be seen in as ectopic and abortion, whereas the high levels are seen in HMOL and RH isoimmunization. Now, what is the role of progesterone? See, as it is clear that the basic role of progesterone is the maintenance of pregnancy. But how does these effects of progesterone are carried out? So one thing, number one, it prepares the endometrium for implantation. That is, it makes the endometrium, secretory, more vascular. Then it causes the desudalization of endometrium. Then it has got angiotensin refractoriness in the pregnancy. It promotes the uterine quiescence in pregnancy. What is quiescence? That is, it makes the uterus silent. It makes the uterus not to contract by stabilizing the lysosomal membranes and reduce prostaglandin productions. It also suppresses the maternal immune response to fetal antigen. Now, how does this happen? Now, and what is the importance? Why do we need to suppress the maternal immune response to fetal antigen? Because if this does not happen, then the allograft rejection will occur. The fetus will get aborted. So the immunosuppression is very, very important. Now, how does this effect is basically how does this effect occurs? So progesterone has been shown to increase the cytokines produce T helper cell 2 types, which predominate over those produced by T helper cell 1 types, resulting in the maintenance of pregnancy. This part I had discussed in last slide also. Then T helper cell 2 derived cytokines, interleukin 4 and interleukin 6, they induce the release of more HCG, and the HCG stimulates further more production of progesterone from the corpus luteum. So see, this is a vicious circle. That progesterone increases the cytokines, IL-4, IL-6, which in turn increase more HCG. HCG in turn increases more progesterone. So progesterone has been shown to stimulate the secretion of T helper cell 2 types and reduces the secretion of T helper cell 1 types. Thus, maintenance of pregnancy has been attributed mainly to T helper cell 2 types. Now, what are the other effects of progesterone? So progesterone also has an impact on the other process of pregnancy, like it helps in the temperature regulation. It also helps in the breast milk production. It also helps in the blood vessel dilatation and relaxation of other smooth muscles other than the uterus. As I said, that the progesterone has got lysosomal membrane stability. So this action has got an impact of relaxation of smooth muscles that is responsible for quiescence of uterine activity. But the same activity is also responsible for producing a certain side effects also, like it causes the quiescence of bladder muscles, bowel and esophagus, resulting in a lot of heartburn, constipation or frequent micturition. Then it also has an impact on the cartilages in the body, which is affected by progesterone production during pregnancy. The hormone softens the cartilage and can result in the pain in the pubic bone. So the cause of this typical, suprapubic pain on the pubic area is because of this hormone progesterone. So to summarize, the low serum progesterone early in pregnancy suggests poor luteal function and is seen in about a third of women with recurrent abortion. And that is the basic principle of giving the progesterone in those patients who have got a history of recurrent early pregnancy losses or recurrent preterm labors, right? Or it is also known as medical cerclage. Now, a little about the estrogen. See, estrogen is in 3 forms: estriol, estradiol, and estrione. Estriol is the major estrogen of 3 estrogens in the pregnancy. The major site of production is syncytiotropoblast. It is synthesized using both maternal and fetal components along with the placenta. It is first detectable as early as 9 weeks post-conception. Low levels of estrogen can be seen in fetal death, adrenal atrophy, anencephaly, H-mole, placental sulfatase and aromatase deficiency, and in Down syndrome. Now, the typical changes which can be seen in the excretion of these three important hormones, that is pregnenolone, progesterone, that is the main urinary metabolite of progesterone, estriol and HCG are shown in the next figure. So just to have a look at this figure, as you can see that the pregnenolone, this is the basically the changes in this excretion of these three hormones in the urine. Now, changes in the endocrine glands during pregnancy. So we have got many endocrine glands present in the body, and pregnancy brings about a lot of changes in these glands. So we'll be discussing about these glands one by one. So first we'll talk about pituitary gland. The weight of pituitary gland increases by 30 to 40%, and the size also increases to as much as twice the normal size. So it can be as much as 12 millimeters, which can be detected on an MRI or a CT scan. There is predominant increase in the acidophilic prolactin secreting cells. It is because of the effect of estrogen. The blood supply also increases, and prolactin and oxytocin and the predominant hormones which are secreted by these pituitary glands are prolactin and oxytocin. The clinical significance of these anatomical changes is that because of the enlargement of the size of pituitary, there is a compression on the optic chiasma, which may be causing bitemporal hemianopia. Also, because of the increased vascularity in the pituitary gland, whenever there is a sudden fall in blood pressure, as seen in PPH, that is postpartum hemorrhage, there may be sudden ischemic necrosis. This is known as Sheehan syndrome. Now, what are the main physiological changes or the main hormonal changes because of these pregnancy-induced changes in the pituitary gland? So there, the levels of the gonadotropies, that is follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone levels are low. Now, what is the cause of this low levels of LH and FSH? There is basically, because of high progesterone and estrogen, there is a negative feedback impact on the pituitary, which causes low LH and FSH. That is why there is ovarian quiescence. And that is why the menstrual cycles are withdrawn. That is, there is amenorrhea. So low levels of LH and FSH are responsible for anovulation during 9 months of pregnancy and amenorrhea, right? Now, growth hormone is high due to its basically variant, which is mainly produced by placenta. Now, again, I'll be discussing about growth hormone in my subsequent slides. Prolactin levels are also high. They can be as high as 10 times the normal. Then thyroid stimulating hormones remains same. Then adrenocorticotropic hormone and corticotropin releasing hormone levels are high, and antidiuretic hormone remains same. Now, what happens to thyroid gland? So there is a hyperplasia and slight generalized enlargement of the thyroid gland. However, the pregnant woman remain euthyroid. That is, there is not much change in the thyroid function. The maternal serum iodine levels fall due to increased renal loss and transplacental shift to the fetus. So the iodine intake requirement increases from 100 to 150 micrograms per day to almost 200 micrograms per day as per the WHO recommendations. There is a rise in the basal metabolic rate due to a net increase in maternal and fetal oxygen demands. Increased serum proteins, which are bound to iodine, and thyroxine bound globulins due to the estrogen stimulation are also, this is increased. But total T3, T4 is increased, but free T3, T4 and TSH remains same because it is there is increase in thyroid binding proteins. So total is increased, but the free levels remain same. The thyrotropic effect of HCG in first trimester may also cause transient hyperthyroidism. This is also known as gestational transient thyrotoxicosis. Now, what happens to the fetal thyroid gland? So fetal thyroid levels, thyroid starts to function only after 12 weeks of pregnancy. Now, what is the clinical significance of this? So if there is maternal hypothyroidism in first trimester, it will result into the fetal poor neurological development because the entire neurological development which is occurring as a part of organogenesis in the first trimester is basically dependent on the maternal thyroid hormones. So whenever there is a need for the early correction of maternal hypothyroidism in pregnancy. Calcitonin levels, which are secreted by the parafollicular cells present in the thyroid, is increased by 20%. Now, what is the impact of this calcitonin? This also I will discuss in the subsequent slide. The calcitonin basically protects the skeleton from excess bone loss during pregnancy and lactation. Now, ACOG recommends that there is no need for routine screening of all pregnant women for thyroid functions, but high-risk screening in first antenatal visit is required with TSH whenever there is indication. Now, what is high risk screening? That is, whenever there is an indication of a neurologically impaired childbirth in the previous or last pregnancy, or there is a history of recurrent abortions, or maybe certain of these kind of histories, then, or maybe the mother is known hypothyroidism. In those cases, we need to do thyroid assessment in the first trimester, right? Okay. So parathyroid gland, there is hyperplasia of parathyroid gland. The levels of PTH hormones remain unchanged. That is, although the size increases, but the level of hormone produced remains unchanged. The main function of parathyroid hormone is to basically regulate the synthesis of 1,25-dihydroxyvitamin D3 and mobilization of calcium from the bone. Now, this 1,25-dihydroxyvitamin D3 enhances calcium reabsorption from the kidneys and small intestines. So this effect of vitamin D3 is beneficial in meeting the increased fetal calcium demand in second half of pregnancy. Calcitonin has got antagonistic action to parathyroid hormone and vitamin D3. It causes mobilization of calcium from maternal bones. Right. Now, since there is an increase in the thyroid binding globulin, which is dependent on the estrogen, a failure of protein binding, plasma protein bound iodine to rise indicate fetal compromise. Right. Now, what happens to adrenal cortex? There is a slight enlargement of the adrenal cortex, that is, there is thickening of zona fasciculata. There is a significant increase in aldosterone, deoxycorticosterone, corticosteroid binding globulins, adrenocorticotropic hormone, cortisols, and free cortisols. The levels of free cortisols are almost double in pregnancy. Then this hypercortisolism occurs due to increased plasma cortisol half-life, and there is a delayed plasma clearance. Right. Now, what happens to pancreas? There is hypertrophy and hyperplasia of the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas. There is hyperinsulinemia, especially in the third trimester, but insulin sensitivity decreases due to anti-insulin factors like human placental lactogen, CRP, then there is interleukin 6, then there is tumor necrosis factor and leptin. The insulin resistance therefore increases. There is increased maternal blood glucose in second half of pregnancy. Now, we will discuss about the hormones. Now, these were the changes in the glands. Now, we'll talk about the hormones which are basically released by these endocrine glands. So first, I will talk about oxytocin. Oxytocin is also known as quick birth hormone. It is basically a nonapeptide synthesized in the magnocellular neurons of supraoptic and paraventricular neurons. It is transported with transport protein neurophysin to the posterior lobe of pituitary, where it is stored attached to the axons. It is released near term to initiate parturition. Sir, I'll take this call for a second. Hello, Ritu, yes. सर बाद में बात करूं, मेरी क्लास चल रही है.
Madam, kindly unmute, madam. Ma'am, we can't hear you. Yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
Now you can hear, okay, sir. Sir, earlier yes, also you was not able to hear me.
We can hear you, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So it is so it is basically stored in the posterior pituitary, but only released near term to initiate parturition. The oxytocin receptors also increase in the myometrium almost near term. So there is also synthesis. But this oxytocin is not synthesized only by this magnocellular cells of the supraoptic and paraventricular neurons. It is also synthesized locally by the decidua, placenta, and the extra-embryonic fetal tissues during pregnancy. There is, multiple sources of synthesis of oxytocin in pregnancy. Now, the oxytocin is the first and most potent uterotonin. That is, it basically activates the Braxton Hicks contractions in the early pregnancy. Then it also initiates true labor pains in term as well as preterm pregnancies. A synthetic version of this hormone known as pitocin is sometimes used to induce labor contractions in post-term or post-dated pregnancies. It is also responsible for stimulating the milk glands to produce milk, that is the milk ejection reflex. Oxytocin is sometimes referred to as the curdle hormone also because, sorry, sir. It is sometimes, it is also referred to as cuddle hormone because as I said, that it is basically responsible for the release of milk from the maternal breast at the time of sucking by the fetus, right? So next we'll talk about the human placental lactogen. So this is the human placental lactogen is basically secreted primarily into the maternal circulation. Most of its function occur at the site of action in the maternal tissues. This human placental lactogen is thought to be responsible for the marked rise in the maternal plasma insulin-like growth factors. Number one, concentration as the pregnancy approaches near term. Human placental lactogen exerts metabolic effects during pregnancy via insulin-like growth factor 1. It is associated with insulin resistance, enhanced insulin secretion, which stimulates lipolysis, increasing circulating free fatty acids, and inhibits gluconeogenesis. So basically, the main function of HPL, that is human placental lactogen, is into the metabolic changes associated with the pregnancy, right? It antagonizes the insulin action, induces the glucose intolerance, as well as lipolysis and proteolysis in the maternal system. Now, prolactin. The levels of prolactin increase markedly during pregnancy. That is, the levels are as high as 10-folds. The level may reach to 150 nanograms per ml, but the levels fall paradoxically post-delivery. Now, why I said they fall paradoxically post-delivery? Because the main action of prolactin hormone is basically, it starts after delivery, that is lactation. But the levels fall because already, see, prolactin is associated with the production of milk as well as the expression of milk. So the production part is already over during pregnancy, and it is a continuous process. And the plateau level is maintained after the delivery, which is responsible for both the actions. There is a pulsatile burst secretion in response to the baby sucking. In early pregnancy, prolactin initiates proliferation of glandular cells and pre-secretory cells of the breast. It also augments number of estrogen and prolactin receptors in the cell. It promotes mammary alveolar cell RNA synthesis, galactopoiesis, production of casein, lactalbumin, lactose, and lipids, which are the chief components of the breast milk, right? It also present, the prolactin hormone is also present in very high concentration in the amniotic fluid. So uterine decidua is the site of synthesis of amniotic fluid prolactin. So prolactin is present basically both in maternal circulation as well as into the amniotic fluid. But the exact role of amniotic fluid prolactin is not known. It may be responsible for preventing the fetal dehydration, that is mobilization of extracellular fluid to intracellular compartment, right? Now, what are the main, stimulators or inhibitors of the release of prolactin? So the main stimulators for the release of prolactin in pregnancy are estrogen, thyroid releasing hormone, and serotonin, whereas the inhibitor is dopamine. The dopamine levels are inhibitors of prolactin. Now, a little about the hormone relaxin. Relaxin is a hormone which is basically produced by the ovary and the placenta during pregnancy. The function of relaxin hormone during pregnancy is to soften and lengthen the ligaments in the tissues to allow for easier passage of the baby through the birth canal. So the main role of relaxin comes near term pregnancy, and it also allows for the, the joints to relax, to accommodate the growing fetus and the uterus. Then the endorphins. The body produces a lot of endorphins in response to the pain or stress, and pregnancy is no exception. They will be produced throughout the pregnancy, especially during the childbirth. The levels of endorphins will drop immediately following the delivery of the baby. Now, growth hormone. So in the first trimester, the growth hormone levels are predominantly secreted by the maternal pituitary glands, but by 6th week, the placenta takes over the production of growth hormone, and the maximum level of placental growth hormone production is by 20th week of pregnancy. Now, this to differentiate between the maternal pituitary growth hormone and placental growth hormone, we can also use the terminology as placental growth hormone, PLGH, right? To different, or it is also known as a growth hormone variant. Now, this growth hormone is present both in the maternal serum and the amniotic fluid. Now, what is the difference between the maternal growth, the pituitary growth hormone and placental growth hormone? So basically, they both differ from each other by 13 amino acids. There are 13 amino acids which are different in these two hormones. It is mainly secreted by the syncytial trophoblast in a non-pulsatile fashion. The exact role of this growth hormone in pregnancy is not known, but it may stimulate the fetal growth by upregulation of insulin-like growth factor 1. The levels of this placental growth hormone also correlate very well with the fetal birth weight. So it may also have again, as I said, has a correlation with the growth of the fetus. The maternal serum at GH levels control uterine artery resistance. So both this maternal pituitary GH levels and the placental GH levels have got different action, right? Now, melanocyte. This hormone causes pigmentation changes in the mother's body, which may be seen as linea nigra, chloasma, and darkened nipples during the pregnancy. The pigmentation changes usually fade after birth. And there are, in the last class, I think I discussed what is chloasma. It is basically the pigmentation of the face in a mask-like manner, right? Then cortisol. The cortisol, basically there is the site of production of cortisol is adrenal glands, but the adrenal production of cortisol remains unchanged, but the metabolic clearance of the hormone is reduced. So serum concentration of circulating cortisol ultimately rises because there's a disbalance in the two processes. Now, what happens to the adrenocorticotropic hormone? In early pregnancy, the levels of ACTH are decreased, but then the ACTH and the free cortisol levels ultimately rise. So this paradoxic change in the levels of ACTH during the pregnancy is not very clearly understood, but it has been proposed that it may be due to the raised feedback threshold to the release of ACTH from the high levels of cortisol, or there may be increased tissue refractoriness to the action of these hormones. Now, deoxycorticosterone, potentially it is a mineralocorticosteroid. The levels are progressively increased all throughout the pregnancy, and the levels may be as high as 15 times. The levels may be in the range of 1500 picograms per ml. But the source is not from the adrenals, but from the kidneys, resulting from the estrogen stimulation, right? Now, what happened to dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate? The levels are decreased in the maternal serum and urine because there is increased metabolic clearance through extensive maternal hepatic 16-alpha hydroxylation, and there is a placental conversion to the estrogen. Now, what happens to androstenedione and testosterone? The levels of these two hormones are increased. Both are basically converted to estriol in placenta. So this testosterone does not enter fetal circulation. If it at all enters to the fetal circulation, it will cause the masculinization of a female conceptus, right? Now, what happens to aldosterone levels? The level of aldosterone hormones is increased, and there is a protection against the natriuretic effect of the progesterone and atrial natriuretic peptide. The metabolic changes of pregnancy. So what happens to the metabolic changes? I'll be discussing only about the main metabolic changes. So what happens to carbohydrate metabolism? There's mild fasting hypoglycemia, postprandial hyperglycemia, and hyperinsulinemia. There is progesterone, placental growth hormone, progesterone hormone, placental hormone, placental growth hormone, prolactin, cortisol, tumor necrosis factors. All these hormones, they play a very important role in this increased peripheral resistance to insulin. Therefore, the pregnancy is a diabetogenic state. That is, whatever sugar is available in the body is not being utilized. So there is the increased level of free glucose in the circulation. That is why this pregnancy is a diabetogenic state. And then there is also increased hepatic gluconeogenesis, which is augmented because of the result of a lot of hormones. Now, what happens to the fat metabolism? The concentration of lipids, lipoproteins, apolipoproteins in the plasma rises. It is basically because of the increased insulin resistance and the estrogen effect. This augmented lipid synthesis and also because of food intake, the fat accumulation occurs in the first trimester of pregnancy. This increased lipolytic activity and decreased lipoprotein lipase in third trimester, because of which the fat storage declines in the third trimester. So this transition favors use of lipids as energy source and spares the glucose and proteins for the use by fetus. And the maternal hyperlipidemia, which is a typical of third trimester of pregnancy, is also encountered. So what happens to the electrolytes and minerals? The actual serum concentration of sodium and potassium is reduced slightly, although total accumulation is elevated slightly. Now, why this happens? This may be basically related to the plasma volume expansion and altered osmoregulation. Glomerular GFR of sodium and potassium is increased, but reabsorption is also increased. So ultimate excretion remains unchanged. Serum calcium levels fall, that is both ionized as well as unionized, but the developing fetus poses increased demand, which is basically met by the increased intestinal absorption under the effect of 125 hydroxy vitamin D3. Then the magnesium levels decline and phosphate levels remain unchanged in pregnancy. So with this, I bring this is basically a nutshell about the hormonal and physiological changes of pregnancy. Now, any questions from the audience?
Thank you, ma'am, for this wonderful presentation and for sharing your knowledge with us. And any queries are welcomed.
See, here I would like to summarize just the few changes here. Like basically the HCG, the progesterone and the estrogen are three hormones which are of chief importance for regulation, for initial continuation of pregnancy and maintenance of pregnancy. And under the impact of these three hormones, all other changes in the pregnancy occur. Whatever changes we have talked about, the endocrine changes, the changes in the anatomical changes, the physiological changes otherwise which occur, the changes in the cardiovascular system, changes in the metabolic system, they are all basically because of these three basic hormones, right?
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your knowledge with us. There are a few in the chat box. There are a few questions like, can we get the recordings, please?
Yes, I think the organizer will have to tell. I am not the right authority to answer that.
Yeah, because I think I'm from Unbuy Secretariat. To all the participants, the recording will be updated on our Unbuy website in the next 2 days' time.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you everybody for attending the session and have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.